Thanksgiving has always been a noisy, chaotic affair in my family. Ever since I can remember, the holiday has meant the smell of roasted turkey seeping into every corner of the house, children running around underfoot, aunts arguing about recipes, and the inevitable shouting match between my father and my uncle over politics. It was predictable, messy, and often exhausting, but it was tradition. This year, though, felt different before it even started. I'd been dreading it in the days leading up to November, not because of the turkey or the family drama, but because of the secret I carried. A secret so massive it felt like a weight pressing on my chest every morning when I woke up. $12 million. That's what sat in my bank account, quietly accruing interest, silently reshaping the course of my life while I pretended everything was the same. I hadn't won the lottery. I hadn't robbed a bank. It was the result of a tech startup I joined nearly a decade ago, when I was still a fresh-faced college graduate with little more than ambition and caffeine in my veins. We were nobodies then, just a handful of stubborn coders and dreamers crammed into a dingy apartment, building an app we weren't even sure anyone would care about. But years passed, investors noticed, and eventually, so did the world. Last spring, the company sold for an astronomical amount. By the time the dust settled and the lawyers finished shuffling papers, my cut, after taxes, was $12 million. For months, I told no one. Not my parents, not my friends, not even my sister, Emily, who had always been closer to me than anyone else. It wasn't that I didn't trust her, but the money terrified me. It felt radioactive. I didn't want to change how people looked at me or how they treated me. I didn't want to become a walking dollar sign, the relative everyone suddenly remembered to call, the friend who could help out with just this one thing. So I lied. I kept living in my modest apartment. I drove my beat-up Honda Civic. I ate ramen on lazy nights and shopped at thrift stores. Outwardly, I was the same person I had always been. But on the inside, I was different. Every decision I made was weighed against the knowledge that I could walk into a dealership tomorrow and drive out in a Porsche. I could buy a house in cash. I could quit my job forever. Yet I did none of those things. That's why, when I pulled up to my parents' driveway on Thanksgiving morning, gripping a bottle of red wine I'd picked up on the way, I wasn't worried about anyone discovering my secret. I'd hidden it well. No one had a reason to suspect a thing. The house looked the same as it always had. 2 stories of red brick, ivy creeping up the sides, a wreath of autumn leaves hanging on the door. Inside, it was already buzzing with life. My mother was in the kitchen basting the turkey, barking orders at my cousins to set the table. My father was half watching football in the living room while loudly explaining the rules of the game to anyone who would listen, even though everyone had heard the same explanations for 20 years. "Hey, you made it." Emily greeted me at the door, pulling me into a hug. She smelled faintly of cinnamon and hairspray, and her laughter, as always, was infectious. She looked good, better than I'd expected. Her life hadn't been easy the past few years. A messy divorce had left her with debt, and she'd been juggling 2 jobs to make ends meet while raising her 8-year-old son, Caleb. I tried to help here and there, slipping her gift cards or paying for Caleb's school supplies, but she always refused anything bigger. She was proud, stubbornly so, just like me. "You brought wine," she said, taking the bottle from me. Classy move. Mom will probably complain it's the wrong kind, though. When has she ever not complained? I said, and we laughed together before joining the chaos inside. Dinner was the usual storm of voices and clinking dishes. The turkey came out dry. The stuffing was undercooked, but no one cared. Plates were piled high, glasses refilled often. Caleb made everyone laugh with his knock-knock jokes. My uncle ranted about the government. My mother bragged about her new gardenias. It was noisy and imperfect and exactly what Thanksgiving was supposed to be. It wasn't until dessert that the conversation turned. My aunt, a woman with a knack for prying into places she didn't belong, asked if I was still at my same job. "Yes," I said smoothly, taking a sip of coffee. "Same place, same cubicle." She sniffed, unimpressed. "You must be making more by now, though. You're not still scraping by, are you?" I laughed, but Emily's eyes flicked toward me, curious. She'd asked me before about my finances, casually, like a sister would, and I always brushed it off. Tonight, though, Under the glow of the chandelier and the warmth of family chatter, something in her gaze sharpened. "Actually," Emily said slowly, setting down her fork, "I think you're hiding something." The table went quiet. Even the kids stopped whispering. I forced a laugh. "Hiding something? Like what?" She tilted her head, studying me the way only a sibling can. "You've been different this year. You don't complain about money anymore. You don't stress the way you used to. And last month, when Caleb needed a new laptop, you offered to buy it without blinking. That's not you. Not the you I know." The silence at the table deepened, thick enough to choke on. My heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at me to deny it, to brush her off with a joke, to change the subject. But something in her eyes, curiosity, suspicion, maybe even hurt, pinned me in place. I swallowed hard. "Emily," I began, my voice barely more than a whisper. "What is it?" she pressed. "What's going on?" And before I could stop myself, before I could think of the consequences, the words tumbled out. "I have $12 million. The room erupted. The noise hit me like a physical wave, gasps, exclamations, even a spoon clattering onto a plate. For a moment, the Thanksgiving table looked like a stage caught mid-performance. Everyone frozen in disbelief, their eyes trained on me as though I had sprouted horns. 12 million what? My uncle blurted, leaning forward, his face red with the wine he'd been drinking. "Dollars," I said, because the truth was already out. $12 million. The silence that followed was worse than the chaos before. My father finally muted the football game, turning his full attention on me for the first time all day. His brow furrowed, like he couldn't decide if he was impressed or offended. My mother's lips parted, then closed again, as though she was rehearsing which angle of outrage to take. Emily stared at me with wide eyes, torn between triumph and disbelief. "How?" she asked, her voice quieter than the rest. I rubbed my hands together nervously. "The startup I joined years ago, it sold this spring. My share came out to 12 million after taxes." 12 million, my mother repeated, as though tasting the number on her tongue. "And you didn't tell us?" My chest tightened. I didn't want to change anything. I didn't want to become this. "This," my father echoed, his voice rising. "You mean family? You think we just see you as a walking wallet?" I wanted to laugh at the irony, but the tension in the room was too sharp. "Yes," I said simply. "That's exactly what I was afraid of." My aunt let out a dry laugh. "Well, you weren't wrong," she muttered, already calculating in her head what debts or dreams could be smoothed over with a slice of $12 million. Emily's face flushed. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded. "After everything I've been through, the divorce, the bills, raising Caleb. Do you know how many nights I've stayed up worrying if I could keep the lights on?" I looked at her, guilt gnawing at my stomach. "I know. I wanted to help. I tried, but you wouldn't take it. And I thought if you knew the truth, you'd—" "What?" "Hate you," she shot back. "Or lean on you too much. I'm your sister, not a stranger. You should have trusted me." Her words cut deeper than I expected. The truth was, I had trusted her more than anyone else. But I had also been terrified of what even she might become when $12 million entered the picture. The room buzzed with whispers now, everyone talking at once. My uncle was calculating something on his phone, no doubt trying to figure out what a fair share might look like. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin, as though I'd personally betrayed her. Caleb, sweet oblivious Caleb, asked innocently, "Does this mean Uncle can buy me a puppy?" That one nearly broke me. "Enough," I said finally, louder than I intended. The room quieted again. "Yes, I have money." "No, I didn't tell you. I didn't tell anyone. Because the second, everything changes, and I wanted one part of my life that still felt normal. But it's not normal anymore, is it?" Emily said softly. I couldn't answer. The rest of dessert was awkward. Plates were pushed around without much eating. Coffee went cold. Conversation started and died quickly. Everyone wanted to ask me questions, but no one quite knew how. When I excused myself to the living room, Emily followed. She cornered me near the fireplace, her eyes blazing. "You need to help me," she said, her voice low but fierce. "Emily." "No. Listen, I'm drowning, and you've been sitting on $12 million while I've been scraping by, working 2 jobs, praying Caleb doesn't get sick because I can't afford the bills. How could you keep this from me? I swallowed hard, because I didn't want you to feel like you had to ask. Well, I am asking, she said, her voice cracking. I need help. I don't need a mansion or a Ferrari. I just need breathing room. Please. The desperation in her voice twisted my insides. She wasn't wrong to ask. She deserved help more than anyone. But I could already feel the eyes of the rest of the family on us, waiting for their turn, their requests. If I helped her openly, the dam would burst, and there would be no end. I'll think about it, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes filled with tears. You shouldn't have to think about it. I'm your sister. She turned and walked away before I could respond. When I returned to the table, I noticed the way everyone looked at me differently now. My uncle's smile was too wide. My mother's tone was too sweet. Even my father, who had never asked me for anything, kept bringing up how hard retirement is getting. They didn't see me anymore. They saw dollar signs. And I realized, with a sinking feeling, that Thanksgiving had just ended, and the real feast was about to begin. The hours after dinner crawled by like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The house smelled of pumpkin pie and coffee, but all I tasted was the bitterness of being exposed. My secret, the one I had guarded so carefully, now hung in the air like smoke that clung to everything. At first, the questions came disguised as casual conversation. So, my uncle started, swirling his glass of wine as though the words had been hiding in the dregs. What's the smart way to invest money these days? You must know, with your situation. I gave him a vague answer about index funds, hoping he'd drop it. He didn't. You know, he continued, I've been thinking of starting a small business. Just need some seed money to get it off the ground. Nothing crazy. Maybe 20, 30 grand. With what you've got, that's like a dime. My mother gasped, offended. He just told us, George, you can't ask him that outright. But her outrage was shallow, because moments later she leaned across the table and whispered, though, sweetheart, your father and I have been struggling to keep up with the mortgage. If you could help us out a little. And then it began. A chorus of subtle requests, each one framed as reasonable, each one justifiable. A cousin who needed to pay off student loans. An aunt whose car had finally given out. My father, who talked more than once about how hard it was to maintain the family house. How nice it would be if we could renovate the kitchen for the holidays next year. Each voice was a hook, tugging at me, making me smaller. I nodded, deflected, smiled weakly. I wasn't strong enough to outright say no. Emily sat at the end of the table, her arms crossed, watching me with that same wounded expression. She didn't ask again, but she didn't need to. Every time her eyes caught mine, I felt the unspoken question burning between us. By the time people began drifting toward the living room, I was drained. I sank into the old armchair by the window, trying to disappear. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the TV blaring football, none of it registered. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. Caleb toddled over and climbed into my lap. He smelled faintly of syrup and crayons. Uncle, he said innocently, if you're rich now, does that mean you're a superhero? His words nearly broke me. No, buddy, I said softly, stroking his hair. I'm just me. But I wasn't just me anymore, not in their eyes. Later, when most of the family had left and only Emily and my parents remained, the real conversation began. My mother sat across from me with a glass of wine, her eyes narrowed in calculation. Sweetheart, she said, her voice dripping with forced warmth, we don't want to pressure you, but we're family. Family shares. My father nodded solemnly. We've given you everything we could all these years. Food, a roof, support. It's only fair. I stared at them, stunned. Fair? You think I owe you money because you raised me? Because you did what parents are supposed to do? My father's face hardened. Watch your tone. I took a deep breath. I've worked for this. I spent years building that company. I sacrificed. I earned this money. It's not some prize I stumbled into. It's the result of everything I poured into it. I don't owe you. Emily finally spoke, her voice trembling but firm. No one's saying you owe us everything. But you could make all our lives easier with a fraction of what you have. A fraction. And you wouldn't even feel it. I'd feel it. I snapped, louder than I intended. Caleb flinched in the corner. Because it would never stop. First it's the mortgage. then the car, then someone's medical bills, then someone's vacation fund. Where does it end? When I'm broke again? My mother set her glass down with a sharp clink. Don't be dramatic. You'll never be broke again. You don't know that, I shot back. Markets crash. Investments fail. I could lose it all tomorrow. And if I give it away like candy, I won't even have a safety net. Emily's eyes filled with tears. So you'd rather hoard it than save your family? Save you from what? I demanded. From living like normal people? From facing the struggles everyone else faces? I've lived those struggles too, Em. Money doesn't erase them. It just changes them. The room was quiet, except for the faint sound of the TV upstairs. My father's jaw clenched. My mother looked away. Emily wiped at her cheeks, shaking her head as though she didn't recognize me anymore. Finally, she stood. I can't believe you. You've turned into someone else. Someone selfish. If Dad had 12 million, he'd give in a heartbeat. My father puffed up proudly, though I wasn't convinced. I stood too, my voice low but firm. You think I'm selfish? Maybe I am, but you have no idea what it's like to carry this weight. Every day, wondering who actually cares about me and who cares about what I can give them. Tonight just proved me right. Emily's lip quivered, but she said nothing more. She gathered Caleb's things, called him over, and left without another word. The slam of the door echoed in the house like a gunshot. I didn't stay long after. My parents were icy, barely speaking as I grabbed my coat. The warmth of Thanksgiving had burned away, leaving only ashes. When I got back to my apartment, I sat in the dark, staring at the glow of my phone. Message after message pinged in. Cousins, aunts, people I hadn't heard from in months. Each one suddenly very interested in catching up. And among them, a single text from Emily. If you really loved me, you wouldn't have to think about it. I stared at it until the words blurred. For the first time since I became a millionaire, I hated the money. The days after Thanksgiving were the quiet before a storm I didn't yet realize was brewing. I went back to work, buried myself in the routine of emails, meetings, and half-hearted lunches, but I couldn't shake the tension that lingered like smoke on my clothes. My phone was buzzing constantly. Family members I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my number. Cousins wanted business advice. My aunt wanted to talk about her dream project. Even my father sent a message with links to real estate listings in Florida, casually mentioning how great it would be to retire someplace warm. But it was Emily's silence that weighed on me most. After her text on Thanksgiving night, she hadn't reached out again. No calls, no visits, not even Caleb, who usually sent me silly drawings he made in school. I told myself she just needed time to cool down, but every day that passed without a word made the pit in my stomach grow deeper. The real hit came the following Saturday. I had just finished grocery shopping when I got a call from my mother. Her voice was clipped, tight, the way it got when she was determined to win an argument. Your sister came over last night, she began without preamble. She told us everything, how you refused to help her, how you'd rather hoard money than lift a finger for your own family. Mom, no, listen, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't how we raised you. You have the means to change all our lives. And instead of being grateful and generous, you're guarding it like some dragon on a pile of gold. My grip tightened on the phone. I worked for it. I sacrificed years for it. And I've already told you, I can't just hand it out. Her voice turned icy. Then don't be surprised when no one wants you around anymore. Because family doesn't turn their back on family. She hung up before I could respond. That night, I couldn't eat. I sat in my apartment, staring at the walls, trying to convince myself I was right, that I had every reason to keep the money safe. But underneath that logic was a gnawing loneliness, the kind that came from realizing the people you loved most might love you only for what you could give them. The next week, things escalated. Emily showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red, her hair unbrushed, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her purse. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside and let her in. She didn't waste time. I need $50,000, she said. I've fallen behind on the mortgage. If I don't catch up, Caleb and I are out on the street. Please. Her voice cracked on the word please. I felt my throat tighten. Emily, 50,000 isn't just a little help. That's huge. If I give you that, what happens next month? Or the month after? You can't keep bleeding like this. Her eyes blazed with desperation. I'll figure it out. I just need a chance to breathe. You don't understand what it's like living paycheck to paycheck, praying you can keep the lights on. I do understand. I snapped louder than I intended. I lived that life too, for years. And now I finally have a way out, and you want me to just throw it away? What happens when the rest of the family comes knocking? When they all line up with their hands out? Do I just say yes until I'm broke again? She stared at me, stunned, tears pooling in her eyes. You think helping your sister and your nephew is throwing it away? You really think that little of me? I tried to reach for her, but she pulled back. I thought you want to take care of us. I thought you'd want to make sure Caleb doesn't grow up the way we did. But you're so afraid of losing your money that you've already lost your family. Her words landed like a knife. I wanted to argue, to explain, to make her understand, but the look on her face told me nothing I said would matter. She turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The apartment was too quiet after she left. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, wondering how $12 million could feel heavier than a mountain on my chest. For days, I replayed the conversation in my head. Her tears, her anger, my stubbornness. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe I was protecting myself. I didn't know anymore. Then came the breaking point. A letter arrived in the mail, a legal notice. My parents and Emily were contesting my grandmother's will, a will that had been settled years ago, dividing her modest estate equally among the family. But now, they were arguing that since I had no financial need, my share should be redistributed to the others. They had gone behind my back, banding together, trying to strip me of something that wasn't even connected to the $12 million. It wasn't about the money. It was about punishment, about making me bend. I sat in my kitchen holding that letter, my hands shaking, tears stinging my eyes. They weren't just asking anymore, they were taking. They had turned into exactly what I feared. That night, I made a decision. The next day, I called my lawyer. I set up a trust fund for Caleb. Not Emily, not my parents, not anyone else, just Caleb. Enough to pay for his education, to ensure he would never face the kind of financial fear that haunted our childhood. But the trust was airtight. Emily couldn't touch it, nor could anyone else. Only Caleb would benefit when he was old enough. Then I called Emily. She answered on the third ring, her voice brittle. I can't give you money, I said before she could speak. Not the way you're asking, but I've set up something for Caleb. His education will be covered. His future will be secure. That's my promise to him. Silence. Then softly, why not help me too? Because I can't trust anyone else right now, I said, my voice breaking. Not even you. You all prove that. She didn't respond. She just hung up. Weeks later, Christmas came. I didn't go home. I stayed in my apartment, the silence louder than any holiday song. I thought about Emily and Caleb opening presents without me, my parents toasting without mentioning my name. And I realized something. The $12 million had changed my life, but not in the way I expected. It hadn't brought freedom or comfort or joy. It had brought suspicion, division, and distance. But when I pictured Caleb, older, stronger, walking across a graduation stage with his future secure, I felt a flicker of peace. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was all the revenge I could take against the greed that had consumed my family, ensuring the one person still innocent, still uncorrupted, would never need to beg. The rest of them could stew in their resentment. I was done being their feast.